You worked with Ric Flair on the main event of some pretty big shows. I'm going to bring up Starrcade '86, but it's not going to be the question you think. The semi-main event, the scaffold match between the Road Warriors and the Midnight Express. Were you watching that in the back when Jim Cornette?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I thought to myself, I thought those guys were crazy. I'm like, I went with the first time they set that scaffold up, I went down to the ring and I was looking at that thing. I'm like, there's no amount of money in the world to get me on that thing. Don't even ask. Because I'm like, that's crazy. Of course, evidence of that would be when Jim Cornette did the drop and basically busted both his knees. And I guess Ray Traylor, was supposed to be there to catch him, but I'm like, really? I'm like, I know Ray's a big guy, but he's supposed to catch Jim Cornette. Okay, whatever. So yeah, I think all of us were watching it with anticipation to see exactly what was going to happen. And of course, in a sense, you might say we weren't disappointed. I mean, the fans got a good show.
Yeah, but they got the money's worth. Do you remember him getting sort of carried through the back when you were sort of getting prepared?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was memorable.
Well, speaking of memorable, I was hoping for some general Jim Cornette memories. What was he like backstage in the mid-'80s? Because I remember I wasn't even born then. I remember stories of the very early '80s and late '70s where Jim would talk about, before he was even a manager, where he'd say, God, if he can get so much heat with the boys when he's not even wrestling or managing or anything, think how great he'd be in front of the cameras.
Well, Jim Cornette's one of a kind. I mean, his personality is what it is, even to this day. And I don't know that he's really any different or much different present day than he was back then. He did have a tendency. He was a manager and was proficient at running his mouth, whether he was in front of a camera or behind the scenes in a dressing room. And much to his credit, I will say this: he always had a great mind for the business, had some very creative ideas. So he really did fit into the wrestling role very, very well. And I think one of my one memory about Jim was in a transition time when, the rumors were flying around that Jim Crockett Promotions was maybe going to close its doors. They had run into some financial difficulties. I just remember being in Savannah, Georgia, and Crockett had called all of the guys on the show back, into this big room in back to kind of inform them of, if you want to say, kind of give a State of the Union. And I remember Cornette jumping up on this big table and just kind of sharing his thoughts. And in a sense, you might say, just putting it out there for the boys. So even though he at times might have had heat with some of the guys, I really gained a lot of respect for Jim that day to really stand up. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but just the fact that he was willing to say something where the rest of us were just kind of looking around, like, oh man, what are we going to do? So it's a memory of Jim Cornette.